Canada's debt is absolutely staggering, and it's getting worse. That's mostly because of stupidity. Well, let me tell you why. Canada has a public bank, one of the only public banks in the world. It's the Bank of Canada. In the Canadian Constitution, it's allowed to lend money at no interest to municipal, provincial, and federal governments for education, health, housing, and other social programs. And it could loan money at low interest for other things. Any interest, of course, would be paid back to the government. In other words, to taxpayers, to us. And that was the way it was until 1974. Canadians were able to pay for 2 wars, the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Trans-Canada Highway, the Canadian National Railway all across the country, and much more. We created and printed our own money. Now, in 1974, after 108 years of Confederation, Canada's debt was just $21 billion. It was growing by about 5% a year. Now, that's really no big deal. In 1974 was the turning point. That was when Canada's debt began to grow exponentially. Just take a look at this graph. You can see the huge spike in debt in 1974. Why? Because Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau made the decision, very quietly mind you, not to use the Bank of Canada for our money, but to borrow it from a private bank outside of Canada, in Europe in fact, and pay interest on that money to that private bank. Now, obviously, that's not in the interest of the Canadian people. We don't even create our own money anymore. The private bank does. They create it out of nothing. Well, because it's all digital, of course. They press a computer key and it creates it. And then they charge us interest on it. Crazy, right? Here's the result of an audit of government finances in 1992. Now, it showed that the Canadian debt had grown to $37 billion since 1974. However, the interest on that debt was $386 billion. Now, that's 10 times the principal, and money Canadian taxpayers are paying to a private bank in Europe rather than to ourselves. If we paid it to ourselves, it would just go back into our treasury, which would be the same as no interest at all. In 2012, our interest payments to private banks were over $1 trillion. Today, we owe $1.3 trillion, most of it in interest. Now we can't even afford to maintain our infrastructure, like bridges and roads. Our health system is on life support. Social programs are getting cut, all because of these huge interest payments to a private bank. Totally unnecessary. This is the key reason Canada is virtually bankrupt. And now Trudeau's son is promising to up the debt by almost 10%, and at the same time increase our interest payments. This is absolutely crazy. The same thing has been going on in the United States. The Federal Reserve there is also a private bank. The private banking cartel now owns us all. If you're a Canadian, please sign my online petition to get the Government of Canada to stop spending our money needlessly by paying interest to a private bank, when we could create our own money at no interest, as our Constitution provides. Let's get back control of our money and start using the Bank of Canada to create it, as our Constitution mandates. Help end the madness and the stupidity